Hello and welcome to FYI, the Baxter Story podcast. This episode is part of our Mental Health Awareness Week series, and we are doing things differently today. We know how powerful collaboration is, and for this show, we are handing over the reins to Mel Crate. Mel is an awesome wellbeing coach and the founding director of Luminate, a wellbeing consultancy who work with businesses to promote happier and healthier workplaces. Mel will be sharing valuable insights on time management and how it can improve your mental wellbeing. So sit back and relax. We hope you enjoy listening.
Hi, I'm Mel Crate. I'll be guiding you through this podcast on time management and productivity. I'm a mindfulness-based cognitive therapy teacher and a wellbeing coach. So we fuse mindfulness techniques with cognitive behavioural therapy techniques to help people form healthier habits and improve their wellbeing and productivity levels. Time management is crucial for our wellbeing because when we're working productively and managing our time well, we usually feel positive, energised and happier. When we fall into the traps of procrastinating, being constantly distracted and not achieving what we set out to, this usually has a knock-on impact on our mood and our well-being. So across these sessions, we'll be looking at the following areas. We'll start by looking at why we struggle to work productively in our modern world. We'll then look at identifying what we call the core tasks of your work. Then we'll look at managing what we call the big three, and that's energy, focus, and control. The three elements that affect our ability to manage our time and work productively. Lastly, we'll focus on identifying any obstacles that you might come up against when working in this way. We know that modern life can feel overwhelming, with too much to fit in and not enough time to do it in. Ultimately, we were always going to lose the battle over trying to master our time completely, as we are simply trying to fit too much in. Firstly, we have to accept that we cannot do it all. It's simply not possible. We only have 24 hours in a day, so no matter how well we are able to manage our time, there will still be work left undone and things left on our to-do list. Such is the nature of modern life. But time management becomes much easier to approach if we first accept this fact. Rather than thinking about how we can fit everything into our lives, let's focus on how we can bring a little more value to the hours in our day and work in a way that leaves us feeling a little more satisfied at the end of each day. Before we get into it, I wanted to ask you a question. Do you feel consistently time-starved? Do you feel like you never get through half of what you set out to do and that you're always running out of time? If so, hopefully we can help with that throughout this podcast. Let's look at why we find it so hard to manage our time and work productively in our modern world. The way we communicate at work has changed. A lot of communication now happens over email or instant messenger, which are both instant form of communication and tends to dominate our attention. It's very distracting and makes it difficult to get quality work done. We also tend to have a lot of meetings in our working weeks, which can drain our energy and suck up a lot of our time. The devices and the apps that we use were designed to be addictive. They have whole teams of people working on them to work out how to keep us coming back again and again. So it's natural to keep being drawn to your phone to check your WhatsApp or Instagram or other apps. The way we receive information has also changed. We are now used to receiving short, sharp bursts of information, and we find it more difficult to read long-form content or focus for long periods of time. And on top of this, we also take in a huge amount of information every day. In 2011, the average American took in 5 times as much information in a day as they did in 1986. That's the equivalent of 75 newspapers. Every status update you read, every Instagram post, every email is competing for resources in your brain with important things like working through figures for a work report or deciding whether to move out to the suburbs. It takes a huge amount of energy for our brains to process all of that information, which affects our attention span and our energy levels. So with all that in mind, how do we work more productively and get more out of the hours in our day? The first thing to do is to recognise the things that we should be working on and what tasks simply act as a distraction. So the first thing I'd love you to do is to identify the core tasks of your work. To do this, we need to identify the tasks that are most essential to your job role, the jobs that help you meet the key objectives of your role. When we identify what the most essential tasks of our job are, we can use this as a guiding beacon. We can continually ask ourselves the question, does what I'm currently doing contribute to completing these tasks, or is it a distraction? If you could pick 3 to 5 overall tasks that are essential for your role, what would they be? If you're in a sales role, for example, that might be prospecting for new leads, holding calls or meetings with potential clients, and writing proposals. There are, of course, other things you'll need to do, so this isn't an extensive list, and it's not necessarily about eliminating everything else completely, but it's really about prioritization. When we're planning our days and thinking about how best to use our time, these tasks that you identified should be the ones that you focus on the most. We'll return to that concept when we look at planning later on. Let's move on now to the big 3, starting with energy. We know we have a finite amount of hours in the day, but it's about making those hours go further. The more energy we have, the more productive we will feel, and the more we can get done with the hours we have. We know what it's like working through feeling really tired or low in energy. It's like wading through treacle. Our concentration suffers, and it takes us much longer to complete a task. So let's look at the different things that might drain our energy. This can come from any of the following: a lack of sleep, overworking, dehydration, stress, poor nutrition, physical inactivity, and a lack of motivation. Is there anything else that you find drains your energy? We can think of our energy like a glass that we need to keep full. If we take too much liquid out of the cup, we will be lacking in energy. When the cup starts to get empty, we will really feel the effects of this physically and mentally. We need to continue to add to the cup as we take energy out for activities. For example, if we have a very energy draining day at work, what can we do after work to top the cup back up? Sometimes a night of Netflix is what we need, but sometimes a yoga class, a walk, or taking a bath might be better to boost our energy levels. We can also think about this in the context of our working day. If we have quite a long energy draining meeting, what do we need to do after that to boost our energy levels again? It might be a quick walk around the block, it might be eating an energy boosting snack, or having a nice conversation with a colleague. So now I want you to think about what behaviours, activities, or situations deplete your energy levels. And then what contributes to your energy levels or makes you feel energised? Lastly, are there any immediate changes you could make to improve your energy levels? A couple of key things to remember here. Sleep, nutrition, and physical exercise will all play a major role in your energy levels. Either under or overeating can make us feel low in energy, so be sure to keep some nutritious snacks to hand. Try to ensure you're getting a minimum of 7 hours of sleep a night if you can. Lastly, Try to get plenty of physical movement into your day, as this will boost your energy levels. Energy begets energy, meaning that the more active we are, the more energetic we're likely to feel. In this vein, I wanted to share an interesting insight from a professional sports person we all may know. The tennis player Andy Murray was interviewed and asked the question, why are the longer tennis matches so tough? This might sound like an obvious question, as playing tennis for 4 hours is obviously going to be grueling. But what he said was really interesting. He said, it's not the physical tiredness that has the biggest impact. We can train for that and prepare for it. It's the mental tiredness that is so difficult, which comes from making thousands upon thousands of decisions constantly for that time period. At a certain point, the quality of our decision-making starts to suffer. Although we may not be professional athletes, we are no different in that aspect. Our working days are a series of constant decision-making. What wording to write in this document, how to answer this email, how best to communicate an outcome. It's endless. And so many of these decisions happen subconsciously. It's a lot of work for our brains to do, so naturally we will also experience this mental fatigue and will get to a point where it's counterproductive to keep on working. To demonstrate this, John Pencavel, a social scientist and economist from Stanford University, carried out a comprehensive study of long working hours in 2014. He compared data from thousands of workers, comparing hours worked with output and success. His findings were definitive. Workers who clocked up 70 hours per week achieved no more than those who had worked 55 hours. From the early studies on companies and countries who have embraced shorter working weeks, for example, the 4-day working week, productivity is yet to go down. People are achieving the same amount or more than they did when they worked longer working hours. Think about the impact on our health, both mental and physical, of overworking. Our energy dips, we lose focus, it has an impact on our immune system, and our bodies tend to release too much cortisol, the stress hormone. We need to use our working hours more wisely, not add on more hours. Be strict with yourself on your working hours. The studies are fairly definitive here. Beyond around 50 hours a week, you're not getting any more done, even if it looks that way. In order to keep our energy levels up throughout the day, we also need to understand the importance of breaks. I'd like to share another fascinating study with you. It was a study involving the judicial system in Israel. This study was done by looking at the decisions judges make on whether to grant a prisoner parole or not. Now, we'd think that these decisions were made based on the facts of the case and the behaviour of the prisoner. But there was something else at play here. The study found that the judges gave more lenient decisions at the start of the day and immediately after a scheduled lunch break in court proceedings. So, if you were being seen first thing, your chances of being granted parole were pretty good. But if you were seen at the end of the day or just before lunch, you've almost got no chance. Scientists looked at more than 1,000 rulings made in 2009 by 8 different judges. They found that the likelihood of a favourable ruling peaked at the beginning of the day, steadily declining over time from a probability of around 65% to nearly 0, before spiking back up to 65% after a break for a meal or a snack. What does this tell us? Breaks are incredibly important, as our decision-making ability suffers greatly when we start to get mentally fatigued. You can imagine the effect this is having on the quality of our work and our productivity levels. So here are some tips to optimise your breaks. Firstly, We want to schedule them in to make sure they happen. If you've got back-to-back meetings, try and make sure you have some gap in between to give yourself a break. Try and get moving in your breaks if you can, and if you can get outdoors, even better. This will really help refresh the mind. The body needs fresh air. Lastly, if you can take your breaks away from devices, this will be really beneficial for our productivity levels. Remember how we spoke about the amount of information we take in every day? If we can give ourselves a break from this, even just for 10 minutes, it can make a real difference to how mentally fatigued we feel. So rather than sitting in the breakout area looking at social media, can you go outside for a quick 5 to 10 minute walk around the block? Next, we're going to move on to the second element of the big three: focus. Research tells us that our attention span is shrinking. Research has measured this to be around 12 seconds in the year 2000, and in the year 2013, it was just 8.25 seconds. After an interruption, it can take people up to 23 minutes to fully return to the same level of focus. So every time we switch our attention from a task to look at our phone or our emails, it can take us a long time to focus again when we go back to that original task. We know that high-quality work is produced when we times intensity of focus with time spent. The part we tend to struggle with is the intensity of focus, which is why difficult tasks tend to take us longer to complete than they need to. So how do we improve our focus? Various research studies have indicated how effective mindfulness can be for improving focus. One study showed how after practicing just 10 minutes of meditation, people showed a better level of focus in subsequent tests compared to a control group. So the exercise I'm going to take you through is a meditation designed to improve our focus levels. It doesn't matter if you've practiced plenty of mindfulness before or if you've never practiced in the past. This exercise can be for anyone. I'd recommend for the exercise finding yourself a comfortable seat, resting your hands and arms somewhere that feels comfortable, and trying to hold a position that feels fairly upright and alert, but not too stiff or rigid. We're trying to embody a sense of falling awake rather than falling asleep in mindfulness. If you feel comfortable in closing your eyes, I'd recommend doing so, as that can help us focus and not be distracted by things around us. Just taking a moment to tune into your physical body, noticing the points of contact between your body and the chair and your feet and the floor. Noticing how your body is feeling today. Any physical sensations that might be present. Any particularly strong emotions that are present for you today. And on your next exhale, seeing if you can release any tension that might be present in the body. So dropping your shoulders down, releasing the jaw, holding a completely neutral expression across the face. Shifting your focus now to the sensation of breathing, noticing how it feels to breathe. Where do you feel the breath most strongly in the body? Is it in the chest or the belly as you breathe in? Or around the nose or the mouth as you inhale and exhale? We are now going to maintain our focus on the breath, just tracking that inhale and exhale as we breathe in and out. We're not trying to change the breath or do anything special here at all. We're just simply noticing how it feels to breathe. You can try counting with the breaths. 1 on the inhale, 2 on the exhale, and so on until you reach 10. And when you get to 10, you start again at 1. If you lose your place at any point, you can simply pick up where you left off or start again at 1. Each time your mind gets distracted or you get caught up in thinking, just gently guide that focus back to the breath, to tracking that inhale and exhale. Notice where your mind is right now, and if you've been distracted, gently guiding the focus back to the breath. If your mind feels very busy today, that's okay. It's completely natural. The goal here is simply to notice when you've been distracted and guide that focus back to the breath. We're not aiming to eliminate thoughts. It's natural to think. Just simply noticing when you've got caught up in your thinking and steer our attention back to the breath. You may need to do this 1,000 times during your meditation, and that's okay. Noticing where your mind is right now. Trying to hold our focus on the sensation of breathing. Noticing how it feels to breathe in and breathe out. Shifting our awareness now back to the physical body as a whole. Noticing once more how you're feeling right now. Tuning in to the points of contact between the body and the chair, and the feet and the floor. And taking 2 last deep breaths just to finish the exercise. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you for joining me in that meditation. Mindfulness can be a great tool to help us improve our focus. You may notice that your mind wandered many times during that meditation. That's completely natural. But if you practice regularly, over time, you'll start to notice that happens a little less and that you're able to focus for longer. And this is a very transferable skill to take into our work. The practice we just did was 5 minutes. See if you can make time for that exercise once a day and notice if it helps you focus better when working. Some other ways we can improve our level of focus and concentration span include things like reading books or long-form content, completing puzzles or Sudoku, playing memory training games, or practicing something like a language or an instrument. To improve our focus and get better quality work done, we also want to work in what is described as a state of flow. Flow can be described as a mental state in which a person performing an activity is fully immersed in a feeling of energized focus, full involvement, and enjoyment in the process of the activity so that they lose sense of space and time. We won't be able to apply this to all elements of our work, but there may be some tasks we do that require a deep level of concentration and could really benefit from us working in this way. In order to do this, we want to set windows of time where you will focus on one thing. That might be a block of 1 or 2 hours. Agree with the people around you, so that may be your manager, your team, your clients, how frequently you will be available on emails, instant messenger, or phone. We really want to try and get buy-in from others around you here. That is going to be really important in order to do this successfully. Turn off notifications. That includes email, phone, social media, and instant messaging. Identify what a productive work environment looks like to you. Where do you work best? Is it at home? Is it in the office? And if you've got that flexibility, work to that environment. Work in 60 to 90-minute blocks, followed by short 10-minute breaks. You may also want to discuss using headphones in the office, maybe using them for periods of time that is pre-arranged with your team, and when you're wearing the headphones, it's agreed that you're not disturbed unless it's really urgent. This is about trying to respect each other's time so that you can all do the quality work that you need to get done. It's worth now having a think about how can you apply this to certain aspects of your work? What elements of your job would benefit from you working in this way? It's also worth thinking about what barriers or obstacles you might face when trying to work in this way, and what can we do to try and overcome these obstacles. It's worth spending some time trying to map this out. The last thing we're going to touch on in this area of focus is procrastination. We will all procrastinate from time to time, and we probably all know that feeling of frustration when we've put off work and then have to rush through it or work overtime to get it done at the last minute. Procrastination happens for a number of reasons. Our brain likes to preserve energy, so if it can take on an easier task, like answering emails or completing simple admin tasks, it will drive you towards that, rather than the alternative, which is using valuable brain power to focus on something tricky. You may notice that when you're carrying out work that is challenging, you'll be drawn towards checking your phone, your emails, or going to find a snack. This is our brain looking for a distraction. So to overcome this, we need to make our goals and what we're working towards really clear. Part of this will happen in the planning process, which we'll cover in the next section, but a few things we also want to think about here. Break bigger tasks into smaller goals. The more specific we can be with these goals and what the outcomes will look like, the easier it will be to stay on task and complete them. For example, we know if we have a lengthy report to write, we want to break that down into small achievable chunks. So maybe the goal for today is to finish 500 words of the introduction, or to complete chapters 2 and 3. You need to be really clear on what success looks like for the task you're trying to complete. If we just have complete report on our to-do list, the likelihood is we'll put it off because it seems like too big a task to complete. We can also ask others to hold us accountable. You can set yourself mini deadlines for bigger projects and share those deadlines with a colleague, a boss, or even a client. Then you can send a calendar invite to this person, alerting them of that deadline. The chances are If you've sent a calendar invite to your boss or a colleague saying you're going to deliver a piece of work on a certain date and then it doesn't arrive, it's not going to look great, which means you're much more likely to get that work done. We come now to the last of the big three, control. A big cause of feeling stressed often comes from a lack of control, particularly when we've got a heavy workload and a lot to get through. So feeling a better sense of control will come to us through planning our days well, being assertive when we need to, and managing some of the negative thoughts that may cause us stress. But first, making a simple shift in the language we use here can make a big difference. We often say we don't have time for things, whether that's going to the salon for a pedicure, reading a book, or completing something at work. But rather than saying we don't have time for something, we can instead say, that's not a priority to me right now. That helps give us a feeling of control back over our own time and makes it feel like a conscious decision not to do something, rather than a constant battle against the clock. It can help us feel less time-starved. It's a small shift, but it can be quite powerful. We have to acknowledge that we can't do everything, so often it's about our priorities. But in order to feel in control, we have to feel like we have a degree of control over our own time, and this is phrasing that will help with that. When we start to feel overwhelmed at work and out of control, we may notice the same persistent thought patterns or fear arising in our mind. The key thing here to understand is that a thought is just a thought. We are separate from our thoughts, meaning they don't define us. We have the ability to challenge those negative thoughts, and we can choose not to take every thought so seriously. Just because a statement pops up in our minds, it doesn't mean it's true. For example, you may have a heavy workload, and your brain may tell you, I can't cope. My manager is going to be so mad if I don't get this done, and I'm never going to finish it. This isn't a factual piece of information, but a thought that your brain has generated as it feels threatened. We can challenge our thoughts, and we can choose to ignore them when they don't serve us. We are not trying to stop or control the thoughts. We simply become the observer, just noticing the thoughts rather than actively engaging with them. This is a skill that is practiced during mindfulness, and through training the brain to do this, we can actively disengage from destructive thought patterns and reduce our stress levels. If you're starting to feel overwhelmed by your thoughts, you can take a few deep breaths, go for a walk, or take a few minutes to plan and prioritize before getting back into it. When taking back control of our time, we also want to think about streamlining our lives. How can we eliminate and minimize the amount of decisions you have to make? The average person makes hundreds of conscious decisions a day, which can lead to decision fatigue. Every decision requires mental energy, which takes this away from more important tasks. So I want us to think about what we can reduce, what we can eliminate, and what we can delegate or automate. Can you eliminate tasks that you feel obliged to do, but probably aren't that important or aren't part of your core tasks? I tend to use the rule, would anything really good happen if I did do it? Or would anything really bad happen if I didn't? If the answer is no to both, you can think about whether you really need to do it. Can you automate paying your bills? Can you store favourites on a food shopping app and make your life easier? Can you bulk shop or bulk cook items so we don't have to go shopping or cook as frequently? I want you to think about aspects of your own life that you can either reduce, eliminate, or automate. See if you can pick out at least one or two things. The next thing I wanted to come to was about being assertive. We often need to protect our time by learning to say no, and this helps us feel more in control. Whether it's something at work that isn't completely essential, or something in our personal lives, like being involved in a committee at your children's school. When someone asks you to commit to something you're not sure about, firstly, notice how you feel. Your body will often give you a signal if it doesn't like the sound of something. It might be a gut feeling, an uneasiness in your stomach, or tightness in the chest, but listen out for what your body is trying to tell you. Compare it to previous situations. Have you said yes to things like this before to later regret it? We always think we will be less busy in the future, but that usually isn't the case. So if you haven't got time to take on something now, you probably won't have time in the future. Do feel free to ask for more time or information before you make your decision. And if the answer is no, be honest, clear, and succinct about this. Make sure there is no ambiguity around your decision. You only need to give one reason for saying no, even if this reason is just that the task isn't a priority to you right now. If the other person gets angry or upset about your decision, you can acknowledge the other person's opinions or feelings, but stand your ground. It's important to prioritize your own needs so that you don't feel stressed or out of control in the future. Another really important element in feeling like we have control over our days is about planning our days effectively. If we go into our days without a plan, we are likely to get sidetracked by emails and other people's requests, leaving us little time for the work that is really important. So one thing I'd advise is that your daily plan isn't just your overall to-do list. As we mentioned before, we want to break tasks down so that they're achievable. Working from a long to-do list of tasks isn't a great recipe for getting things done. I use a weekly planner for this, and at the end of each workday, I create a written plan for what I will do tomorrow. I identify the 3 or 4 tasks I need to do in that day and schedule in timings for when I'm going to do them. For most of us, we'll be most mentally alert in the morning. So if we come in and start answering emails or doing easier tasks, we may waste the most productive hours of our day. This is why a plan is so important. So here are a few tips on planning. Allow for unplanned activity. There are always things that will come up in your working day which we can't plan for, so don't overschedule your day. Live by the mantra, first things first. What gets done first gets done. So plan your most challenging or important tasks for the morning. This will ensure that we actually get them done before our day runs away with us. Set time zones for deep concentration work. We talked earlier about working in flow. Work out some blocks in your day where you're able to work in this way. Perhaps it's a couple of hours in the morning. Batch your tasks. This will help us to be more efficient and is especially important when it comes to emails, but we'll come back to that in a moment. Include breaks and walks in your plan. These, as we've learnt, are really important for productivity, and we're less likely to skip them if we schedule them in. So the last thing we'll look at in this section is mastering email. We know that for many people, their inbox causes them some level of stress. Research shows that 70% of emails are read within 6 seconds of being received. This means most of us are basically living in our inboxes. Like other forms of technology and social media, email can be addictive. It activates our brain's reward system and releases a hormone called dopamine, which is why we sometimes get a buzz from checking our emails. So it's really important that we don't let our inbox govern how we spend our days, and that we learn to manage emails so that they don't take over. So with this in mind, the first tip is to batch email checking and replying. Have set times in the day when you read and deal with emails. I answer emails at lunchtime and at the end of the day only, unless something really urgent comes up. Set your own frequency for inbound emails, so your inbox might automatically check for new emails every minute, but we can change our settings so that emails are only delivered to us every hour, for example. This will stop us from being distracted by emails so frequently. When you're doing other work, close down your inbox completely rather than just minimizing it. This will help us to stop being distracted by new emails coming in. Secondly is to try and keep a well-organized inbox. Create a filing system that works for you. Ideally, your inbox won't have hundreds of unsorted emails in them. File your emails that you've dealt with immediately. You can use different coloured flags to set a priority list within your inbox. For example, you can flag an email red if it needs urgent attention, orange if it needs dealing with within 48 hours, and green for less urgent things that can answer when you have time. Thirdly, we'd like to create some inbox rules or filters. We can use the clever setting in our email system to create rules or filters. We can filter out any emails that are group emails, newsletters, junk mail, or emails that you're copied into but don't necessarily need to action. We can create rules to pre-sort these emails into the folders so that we don't have to spend time filing them. You should find this easily in your inbox settings, and a quick search on Google should guide you through it if you're struggling. Remember, each email is competing for our attention, so the less emails we see, the better. This will require a bit of setup time, but it will save you time in the long run, so it's worth investing the time up front. Lastly, we want to try and minimize the amount of emails we're sending and receiving. Consider whether an email really needs a response. Think about whether it is something we can resolve over a phone call, particularly if there is something heated or sensitive there. We don't want to be generating emails unnecessarily, so also think about who you copy in and whether you really need to reply all. We've got used to thinking that when people send us an email, we need to respond straight away, but we have the power in making that decision. We've covered a lot of information in this podcast. The last thing I want us to think about is how we might overcome any obstacles when trying to apply these new tools. For example, if your colleagues are constantly instant messaging you for their urgent issues when you're trying to get meaningful work done, how would you deal with that? Research shows that when we think through any obstacles we might encounter and think about how we will overcome them, we were much more likely to do this when those obstacles do arise. So with the example above, we might ask for periods where I'm not contacted, and if that doesn't work, I could try disconnecting the Instant Messenger app or switching off my phone for certain periods and inform colleagues I will be doing this. You ideally want a plan A and a plan B for overcoming those obstacles. So before we conclude this podcast, here's a recap of the things we've learnt. Keep asking yourself, is what I'm doing related to the core tasks of my work? Try and train your attention span so that you're able to focus for longer. Think about your energy levels throughout the day and how you're topping up your cup. Carve out time for working in flow. Plan your days effectively. Know what you would like to complete that day. See if you can reduce, eliminate, and automate tasks where possible. And lastly, try and take control of your inbox. Thank you so much for joining me on this time management and productivity podcast. Good luck on your productivity journey.